This right here is the governor of Georgia, Kemp. He is the individual that rapper Killer Mike uplifted against Stacey Abrams. Remember these photos during the pandemic when Killer Mike was meeting up with Kemp and going around and trash talking Stacey Abrams, which in essence uplifts Kemp, and had black men in the state of Georgia following suit. Yeah, he was cozying up to Kemp. Took a meeting with Kemp. I wonder what was discussed at this meeting, because whatever was discussed at this meeting, it wasn't beneficial to black people in the state of Georgia. But Killer Mike definitely got something out of this meeting. Y'all remember this picture? All at the same meeting, right? And whatever was discussed, Killer Mike then went out and did what he promised Kemp he would do. And yeah, Stacey Abrams didn't get elected as the governor of Georgia. Kemp won another term. I really do wonder what it is that Killer Mike got out of the deal. Was it just plain old money? Did he sell out black people just for money? What did he get out of the deal? Because I guarantee you, black people got nothing out of the deal, especially when the Associated Press is now reporting that Kemp has signed into law more suppression voter laws that affect the black community. That's right. Listen up, voters in the state of Georgia. Kemp has signed new election changes into law, and it starts with the 2024 presidential election. Buckle up. We're going to read this article so you'll know all of the changes that are taking place. The Associated Press is reporting that Governor Kemp signed legislation on yesterday, that makes additional changes to Georgia's election laws ahead of the 2024 presidential contest in the battleground state, including defining probable causes for removing voters from the rolls when their eligibility is challenged. I've talked about voters in the state of Georgia who are having their eligibility to vote in the state of Georgia challenged by regular old other Georgia citizens, not by staff at the elections office. No, any Joe Schmo who is a resident of the state of Georgia can challenge another Georgia resident's eligibility to vote. That means Karen McCarran over in Marietta can look at Deborah down in Fulton County and say, hey, something's not right with Deborah. Let me go down to the elections office and challenge her eligibility to vote in this state. And then Deborah has to jump through several rings and cross over several hurdles to prove that she is eligible to vote in this state. That is why you have to make mental note to regularly check on your eligibility to vote here in the state. You have to check. I check at least every other month to make sure that I am still eligible to vote in this state. Moving on with the article. Republican activists, fueled by debunked theories of a stolen election, have challenged more than 100,000 voters in the state in recent years. The activists say they are rooting out duplicate records and removing voters who have moved out of the state. And I guarantee you that those people that they are targeting look like me, and the people who are doing the targeting don't look like me. But moving on, The bill signed into law, which is SB 189, lists death, evidence of voting or registering in another jurisdiction, a tax exemption indicating a primary residence elsewhere, or a non-residential address as probable causes for removing voters from the rolls. Most controversially, it says the national change of address list can be considered, though not exclusively. Supporters have said the probable cause definition could make the challenge process more difficult, which is not true. Opponents have disputed that, saying the changes would enable more baseless attacks on voters that would overwhelm election administrators and disenfranchise legitimate voters, which is true. I shared a story, which was probably on the other page, the band page, a news story that was done investigating the challenges of a voter's eligibility by other citizens in the state is problematic. Yeah, Karen McCarran over, let's say, in Conyers was perusing through the voter rolls, and she found this black man who was using his barbershop as his mailing address because he was houseless at the time. He would work in the barbershop during the day. He would sleep in his barbershop at night. It was his address. And she challenged his eligibility to vote. And he had to jump through several hoops, jump over hurdles to prove that he was eligible to vote in this state. But moving on. The Georgia bill also allows challenges to be accepted and voters removed from the rolls up until 45 days before the election. That provision in part has prompted the threat of lawsuits from liberal groups because federal law says states and counties can't make systemic changes to voting rolls within 90 days of a federal election. The measure also says homeless people must use the county voter registration office as their address instead of where they live. Opponents have said that could make it harder for homeless citizens to cast ballots because their registered polling place might be further away. Fair Fight Action, a voting rights group founded by former Democratic Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, slammed the signing of SB 189. I bet she did, calling the measure a voter suppression bill that emboldens right-wing activists in their efforts to kick Black and brown voters off of the rolls. And that's exactly what this new law will do. It will embolden these racist ass people in this state to take it upon themselves to go through voter rolls, to work to get Black and brown people kicked off of the rolls. And if you're a Black and brown person that is not continuously checking your eligibility because of these shenanigans, these tricks from the Republican Party, you will go sashaying up to the polls in November and find that you are not eligible to vote. The bill also grants access to Georgia's ballot to any political party that has qualified for the presidential ballot in at least 20 states or territories. The change could bolster independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy. Robert F. Kennedy, who admitted that he has a parasitic worm in his brain that diminishes his mental capacity. That Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Georgia residents, there's a whole lot more in this article, but that's the bulk of this new bill. Continuously check your eligibility to vote in this state. They are pulling out all the stops to keep us from voting, and you have to ask yourself why that is. Somebody asked Killer Mike, what did he get out of the deal? Because this is what Black people got out of his deal.